Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. When Pamela suggested the trip, she called it a restart. I called it a chance. 8 years of marriage had turned into long silences, half-finished dinners, and weekends that felt like business meetings. We both knew something had gone wrong, but neither of us wanted to say it out loud. So when she found this place, Bahia Azul Resort, quiet, private, perfect for couples, I booked it without a second thought. The first morning looked promising. Pamela even laughed at one of my bad jokes over breakfast. For a moment, I thought maybe this trip would work. But underneath that calm surface, something didn't sit right. She checked her phone too often, smiling at messages she didn't share. When I asked who it was, she said, "Just work." That night we had dinner on the terrace. Candlelight, soft waves, the whole postcard scene. She wore a simple white dress, her hair loose. She looked beautiful, but her eyes kept drifting somewhere else. "You're quiet tonight," I said. "Just tired," she replied. "Work's been a lot lately. I just need space to breathe." I nodded. "That's why we're here, Pamela. To breathe again." She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. We finished dinner mostly in silence, the sound of forks and waves filling the gaps where words should have been. Later, when she slipped into bed, she turned her back to me. I stared at the ceiling and thought, this trip might not be about fixing anything. It might be about finding out if there's anything left to fix at all. It must have been close to 1 in the morning when I woke up. The sound was small, a soft click, like glass sliding over metal. I opened my eyes and saw the curtains move with the breeze. The balcony door was half open, and Pamela's side of the bed was empty. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd gone out to look at the stars. She used to do that back when things were good. But the sandals that always sat by her nightstand were gone. I sat up, heart steady but alert. Something in me already knew what I was about to find. I walked barefoot and stepped outside. I spotted her silhouette moving quickly down toward the beach. I followed from a distance. Each step sounded louder than it should have, even with the ocean roaring nearby. The path curved past the pool, then the restaurant, and ended at the long wooden pier that reached into the water. She didn't look back once. When she stopped near the end, I saw him. Tall, broad-shouldered, standing with his hands in his pockets like he'd been waiting. Even from far away, I recognized him. Darren Reynolds. She'd mentioned him once, said they'd worked on a project together. Pamela stepped closer. He smiled, and she went straight into his arms. No hesitation, no guilt, just warmth, the kind I hadn't seen in months. I didn't move, didn't shout, didn't break anything. I just watched. The waves crashed against the pier posts, their voices carried softly by the wind. After a minute, I turned around and walked back up the path, back to the room that suddenly didn't feel like ours anymore. When I lay down again, I stared at the ceiling, listening to the sea. The truth had finally shown itself, and it was quieter than I ever imagined. When the sun came up, Pamela was back in bed, curled on her side, breathing evenly like she'd been asleep for hours. I didn't move. I just watched the light crawl across the wall until she stirred and stretched beside me. "Morning," she said softly, her voice smooth, practiced. "You slept in." "Yeah," I replied, my tone flat. "Guess I needed it." She smiled faintly, sat up, and brushed her hair from her face. "I went for a walk last night," she added, too casually. "Couldn't sleep." "Yeah?" I said. "That late?" She nodded. The moon was beautiful. "You should have seen it." I only hummed, pretending to reach for my phone. Inside, I already knew how the day would play out. She'd pretend, and I'd let her. At breakfast, she was cheerful, talking about snorkeling, massages, and the buffet like nothing had happened. I nodded at the right moments, even managed to smile. To anyone watching, we looked fine. Married, content, ordinary. When she went to the pool, I walked to the bar. Ordered something strong and didn't taste it. I stared out at the water, letting her words from the night before replay in my head. I just need space to breathe. She had space. She took it in someone else's arms. Walking back through the gardens, I knew what my next step was. Not confrontation, confirmation. I wasn't going to shout or demand. I was going to understand exactly how deep this went before I walked away. I found Darren sitting alone in the resort cafe the next afternoon. He wore sunglasses, scrolling on his phone, completely unaware I was watching. I'd left a short note for him at the front desk that morning through Jasmine. John Carter. 10 minutes in the lobby. No scene. When he saw me approach, his expression flickered between confusion and guilt. "John," he said slowly, standing halfway. "Did Pamela?" "No," I interrupted. "She doesn't know I'm here." He nodded, uneasy. "Then maybe we shouldn't." "Sit," I said, calm but firm. He sat. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said, "I saw you last night, on the pier." His jaw tightened. "I figured you might have." "How long?" I asked. He exhaled, rubbed the back of his neck. "About a month, maybe a little more. She told me it started after things got rough between you two. She said she needed clarity." "That's what you call it?" I replied. He looked down. "It wasn't planned. She said your marriage was done, that you were just staying together for convenience." I didn't answer right away. I just studied him. Younger, confident, careless. "Did she tell you this trip was for us to fix things?" He swallowed. "She said it was complicated." "Right." I leaned back. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm not causing a scene, and I'm not calling her out. I just needed to know the truth from you. Now I have it." He frowned. "You're just walking away?" "I'm not walking," I said quietly. "I'm leaving." I stood up and turned toward the exit. Behind me, he called out, "John, she didn't mean to hurt you." I stopped but didn't turn around. Everyone means well, Darren. Until they don't. Outside, I pulled out my phone, opened the airline app, and booked an early flight home. No confrontation, no explosion. Just a plan. Clean, final, mine. Pamela was in front of the mirror when I came back to the room. She was humming softly, fixing her hair. "I booked us dinner by the beach," she said, glancing at me through the reflection. "Lanterns, live music. Jasmine said it's the best place here." "Sounds nice," I said evenly, slipping my phone into my pocket. She turned and smiled. "See? We just needed this trip." I nodded. "Maybe." That evening, we sat across from each other, wine glasses shining between us. She looked radiant, relaxed, like a woman who had nothing to hide. Halfway through dinner, I leaned back and asked casually, "Sleep well last night?" She hesitated, just a flicker, before smiling. "Perfectly. Best rest I've had in weeks." "Good," I said, "because I didn't." She tilted her head. "Still having those work dreams?" "No," I said, reaching into my pocket. I placed a small folded slip of paper on the table, a copy of the note I'd left for Darren that morning. The smile slipped from her face. "What is that?" "You tell me," I said quietly. Her hands trembled. "John, don't," I cut her off. "Not here. I'm not going to shout, and I'm not giving anyone a show. I know where you were and who you were with." Her eyes filled with tears. "It wasn't supposed to—" "I'm sure it wasn't," I said, standing. "You can keep the room through checkout. I'll leave early. We'll talk later. Through lawyers, not lanterns." Pamela reached for my arm. "Please, John, wait." I gently moved her hand away. "I've already waited long enough." Then I set my napkin down, paid the bill, and walked out. Back in the room, I packed my bag in silence. The only sound was the zipper sliding closed, cleaner than any goodbye could ever be. The sky was just starting to lighten when I woke. Pamela was still asleep, turned toward the balcony, breathing slowly and steadily. For a few seconds, I just looked at her. Not with anger, just distance. Whatever we'd been, it wasn't this anymore. I showered, dressed, and packed the last of my things. Down at reception, the lobby was empty except for Jasmine. She looked surprised to see me. "Checking out so early, Mr. Carter?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Change of plans." She hesitated. "Was everything all right with your stay?" "Everything was exactly what it needed to be," I said. The shuttle driver loaded my bag and opened the door. As we pulled away, I looked once more toward the resort. The balcony still in shadow, the ocean steady behind it. Somewhere in that room, she'd wake to find an empty bed. On the flight, I kept my phone on airplane mode. No messages, no noise, just silence. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the weight of trying to fix something broken. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. Just free in a quiet, unfamiliar way. When I landed, I turned my phone on. The screen lit up instantly. 10 missed calls, then 15, then 30. Messages started pouring in. Where are you? Please call me. I'm sorry. It's not what you think. I turned the screen face down. Some things don't need answers. Silence can say everything. 3 days after I got home, a cab stopped in front of the house. Through the window, I saw Pamela step out, dragging her suitcase across the driveway. She looked smaller somehow, eyes swollen, hair tied back, shoulders slumped. I didn't go to the door right away. I sat at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee, listening to her key scrape against the lock. When she finally pushed the door open, she froze. "You left," she said quietly, voice cracking. "I did," I answered. She shut the door behind her, clutching the handle. "You didn't even say a word." "I didn't need to," I said. "You said enough that night at the pier." Tears welled in her eyes. "It wasn't what you thought. Darren and I already talked to him," I interrupted. "I know how long it's been. I know why. You don't need to explain." Her face crumpled. "John, please. I made a mistake. I felt lonely, invisible. It just happened." "People don't just happen," I said flatly. "Choices do." She stepped closer. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling, start over." I shook my head. "It's too late. The papers are already in motion. You'll get them next week." Her lips trembled. "You really filed for divorce?" "Yes," I said. "This isn't revenge, Pamela. It's peace." She looked at me one last time, eyes full of regret. "You're really not going to forgive me?" "I did," I said. "That's why I'm done." An hour later, her suitcase wheels scraped down the driveway again. I watched through the window as the cab drove off. The house was quiet, but this time the silence didn't ache. It settled. For the first time in a long while, it felt like home. 2 weeks later, Pamela and I met at a cafe near the courthouse. She arrived early, sitting by the window with her hands wrapped around a cup. When I walked in, she tried to smile but couldn't hold it. "Thanks for meeting me," she said quietly. "We need signatures," I replied, sliding the folder across the table. She opened it slowly, eyes scanning the pages. "It feels strange," she whispered. "Like we're signing away half our lives." "We are," I said evenly. "But it's better than living half a life pretending it's whole." She hesitated, pen trembling slightly as she signed her name. "I never thought you'd actually leave," she said. "I thought you'd yell, fight, do something." "I did something," I said. "I walked away." Her eyes glistened. "Darren's gone. He stopped calling. I haven't spoken to him since that night." I nodded but said nothing. Some endings don't deserve words. When the papers were done, she closed the folder and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. "I'm sorry, John," she said, looking up at me. "You didn't deserve what I did." "I know," I said. My voice wasn't cold, just final. "But knowing that won't change what happened." She gave a small nod, then stood. "Goodbye, John." "Goodbye, Pamela." When she left, I stayed a moment longer. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not happy, not sad, just steady. 2 months later, the divorce was finalized. Pamela kept the condo. I didn't fight her for it. I never really liked the place anyway. It always felt like a compromise built into drywall. She asked to keep a few photos, some furniture, and her car. I agreed to everything. No lawyers raised voices. No property was worth more than peace. We split the accounts evenly. No alimony, no bitterness. She cried when the papers were signed in front of the notary. I didn't. I moved into a small house near the coast. Simple, uncluttered. I unpacked my books, stocked the kitchen, and settled into the quiet without trying to fill it. I started cooking again, not for anyone else, just to enjoy the act of making something from scratch. Friends asked if I was seeing someone. I wasn't. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't need to. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like half of something broken. One evening, I drove to the coast near home. The beach was nearly empty. I took off my shoes and walked along the shore. It reminded me of that night at the resort, the same sound of water, the same moonlight, but everything else was different. Back then, I'd been following. Now I was just walking. And for the first time, the silence didn't mean loss. It meant peace. Thank you for watching.